Cool. Okay, let us get started. Um, so before we start, I'd just like to form an acknowledgement of country. So we pay our respects to elders past and present, to the many Aboriginal people that did not make elder status, and to the Tasmanian Aboriginal community that continue to care for country. We recognize a history of truth which acknowledges the impacts of invasion and colonization upon Aboriginal people, resulting in a genocide and forcible removal from their lands. Our island is deeply unique, with spectacular landscapes, with our cities and towns surrounded by bushland, wilderness, mountain ranges, and beaches. We stand for a future that profoundly respects and acknowledges Aboriginal perspectives, culture, language, and history, and a continued effort to fight for Aboriginal justice and rights, paving the way for a strong future. So thank you all for coming to our Execulearn, for those of you in the room and also for those of you who are going to be watching this in the future. This is our Execulearn session 1, planning and running your events. Apologies, we weren't able to run it the week before due to a number of events that we had running at the time, and a lot of us were unwell. But yeah, basically, this session is essentially a refresher for planning and running your events. If you haven't attended our Student Leaders Conference, we do a little bit more of a deep dive into this. It's actually a really big session, but we're going to try and condense this to under an hour to try and because of the limited time. But it's basically, yeah, sort of an in-depth from how to planning ahead, completing your application, and how do you get it all the way to launch, and then post-event debrief, and what are the bits and pieces that you have to look out for. But it's also a space for you to inform you, but also give you the opportunity to ask questions about our procedure if you're ever unsure about the process. It's going to be a very casual one as well, so please feel free to pop anything in chat. And just if you could please also have a look through the chat, or you can feel free to unmute and also yeah, say anything about anything that you might have about this session. So again, what do we want you to get out of this session? Well, what we want you to take away from this session is an understanding of why we have risk assessments, so why we do those things if you're not familiar with them yet. So risk assessments are basically documentations that we ask you to fill out whenever you're running an event. It's somewhat kind of like a proposal, but not really a proposal. It's more about assessing what risk factors you might have at your events, and what you need to look out for and what you need to do, what you need to in order to ensure that your events run very smoothly and also safely too. Because at the end of the day, your clubs are governed by our insurance, and so we want you to be, making sure you align to that, but also still running it in a very fun and safe way. And also learning about what risk mitigation procedures mean and why we ask you to do the things that we ask you to do. So to make it a bit more fun for now and a bit lighthearted, I'm gonna do a short exercise to identify the hazards in this image. So you're more than welcome to unmute or just pop it in chat. But basically, my first quiz here is to ask you to identify what can you see, what hazards can you see in this picture. So yeah, I believe there's about 8 hazards in this photo. Can you identify what those are? So I'll give you about a minute. Feel free to pop it in chat or unmute. Yep, there's one chat there. Cool. Yep, open fire, drinking, food service, lack of water. Yep, large crowds. So you've identified 1, 2, 3, 4. Drinking and yep, and technically 5 because yep, there's alcohol and then there's sold out. So you've also yep. So I'll move on to the next one. So basically these are the things. So you've identified most of it really. Great job. So one of the first things you could see here is loud music. So if any of the audience is not acquainted to um, loud music, that could be an issue. You know, and also you've got unsuitable like thongs. You know, you've not suitable footwear. You've also got a sunburnt person. Because so you're not recommending, you know, using sunscreen, especially in a very open festival. Now, I'm not saying these are the kind of events that you'd be running, but you know, a lot of these hazards could apply to your day-to-day events. But basically, it's one of those things that are unexpected that actually you should expect because it could be dangerous. There's also, of course, you've identified lack of water there. It's sold out and no one's replaced it or no one's done anything about it, especially because you've got drinking at your events. You know, you've got someone who um, is you know essentially intoxicated at this point, had a few to drink, and there's no water. It's great that they have food, but you also need water. Food poisoning as well. Here on the left hand side here, someone's already turning green. There's also the one on the tent with a loose rope. So basically, that's a hazard right there. Someone could trip. It's a trip hazard. There's yep, open fire, which also you've identified. So yeah, there's about 8 risks in there, but also yep, the drinking aspect of it is also a risk. Like alcohol in general is a risk for events that you're gonna run, and so that's something that's on you to manage. So make sure that your event runs successfully and safely. And so this is another one as well. You know, like for example, again, and I'm not gonna say that this is the kind of event that you would typically run for a student club, but you've got ones like engineering laneway, for example, that is a huge event. The experience is something quite similar to this, but oftentimes they have risk factors that are actually I guess that you have similar ones depending on the size of the event and also the type of event. You do share the risk in there as with other smaller events. Um, you know, assault for one is another thing that you always look out for. That regardless of the size of your event and what type you run. Weather as well, like rain, lightning. As you've seen in your risk assessments, you could either run it indoors or you just cancel it depending on how bad it gets. So, question is, what exactly is good risk management? Like, what's something that you'd find just outside of your typical RA? Like, what does it actually mean? Because the reason why I ask this is because we are governed by TUSA's insurance, as you may or may not be aware. Just because you are affiliated with with when it comes to being affiliated with TUSA, you do get access to our range of services and support as part of the clubs and societies. But also you are covered in general for insurance, but the way you get covered for insurance isn't limited to just being affiliated. It also means that you have to follow protocol, and that's following whatever's in your risk assessments and having good risk mitigation measures because we cover it on a per event basis too. So just you can't just like have it approved and then that's it without following these protocols because then you could be liable for negligence or duty of neglecting your duty of care. And that's why we have to have good risk management because of our insurance governs that basis. So you can't take half measured approaches. Like for example, with this one, if you're fixing lighting, there's a lot of risks there. You can't just put this a ladder in there and have that. Or this, for example. I grabbed some of a ridiculous couple of photos, but someone is doing something dangerous, and is a chemical hazard or risk hazard, and someone's just there standing, or like chucking in ladders on the corner, um, which could happen depending on what kind of events you have. Um, but basically, when you're doing risk management, you're not just there to simply tick a box. You have to meet legal obligations that are fairly straightforward. But what we're looking for is for pushing beyond what we have to do to basically what we should be doing to create the safest and most rewarding environment for our members. If you're doing something very safe, then that's good. You're gonna create something fun and worry free. The university sets the rules for what we can and cannot do on campus. That's why if you're doing on campus stuff, there's a lot of things here and there. And outside of that, TUSA is the governing body that sets the rules out by which clubs and societies need to comply. So if you're doing things off campus, there's other things that you need to follow, which is usually what we write in there during our daily in our communications when you're running events or for doing RAs in general. But the reason why we have this as well, and this is something that got started on as we hit the 2020s, is that TUSA has a memorandum of understanding with UTAS. So SAF is a component of our agreement to support the clubs and societies, and all the other initiatives to help you student life and basically the well-being of everyone at the university. So what is a risk? Well, these are the different kinds. It's not it's not the full list. It's also there's a whole heap more, including but not limited to injury, illness, death, harassment, or abuse, destruction of property, financial loss, loss of data and records, membership loss, legal liability, minors or vulnerable people at events, and event agreements with licensed venues. So there are things that you have to look out for. And basically, a risk is anything that might affect the overall success of your event, because what you're gonna, and also another thing to look out for is reputation of not just your club, but also our reputation as well as the parent organization. So it's a lot of things, lots of factors that you have to look out for when you're running things. The best events usually it's fun, and it runs very safe and it's worry free. Just pack up and go. Meanwhile, mitigating all of these things. But it's important to consider all the risks involved with running and organizing your event so that you're prepared if something ever goes wrong. Like for example, you need to have a wet weather plan, like for bad weather, or what if a barbecue gas cylinder leaks, or someone trips over a power lead, or if you have children at your events, how do you deal with that? And also managing intoxication at your events as well, if you have alcohol at those. But these are just a few things that you need to consider when you plan and run your events. So yeah, and also financial loss as well. So fix ups from something going bad, that sort of stuff. So whenever you might see this in your documentation, you've got the different risks here. So our goal is to ensure the lowest residual risk rating possible. So if you're just running, say, something like very casual, like a meeting, usually would sit around here. If anything involves, if you have events that involve alcohol or children, your residual risk rating would likely end up around the moderate one. Usually without the appropriate risk mitigation measures, it would be higher. But residual risk rating just means if there's all these risks, if you include all of these risk mitigation measures to make sure that you run your events as safe as you can, as humanly possible, what would the overall risk rating be? So if you do it at the safest way possible, then this is how, within your control at least, what risk rating would it equate to? And so when I say things like alcohol and children, for example, the reason they end up in the moderate risk is because there are external factors which, you might not necessarily be able to control. I mean, you could try to predict a lot of things and you can work with other people, but there's still a risk there, external risk there that might be present. And so that's why it's left there at the moderate risk. But for our other adventure clubs like rafting or dive, there are a lot of external factors, environmental factors, which is why they sit slightly on the higher end of things, but usually quite moderate. If you got very trained people, that sits around there. So ideally, you want to sit in this area here. Um, Even if you're running very safe events, there's a chance that could go up, and so that's why you want to make sure that you follow through your RA, you follow through your procedures to make sure that's low. I also want to bring this up, and this is particularly if you're ever going to think about running alcohol at your events, or if going to have children. And there's this lack of understanding with the word duty of care and how it is shared between us and between the university. Um, you know, Considering that we're the ones that, if you ever apply for funding, we're the ones that provide you with that staff funding, and also insurance and your in-kind stuff like equipment that you hire or the rooms in general. Um, like any entity that organizes activities involving potential risks, so all of you, you must adhere to the principles of negligence law. So this means that you must take in reasonable measures to prevent foreseeable harm to all of your members. So when I say duty of care, it could be something like, let's say one of your members puts out a chair because they walked away from a table, right? And you put out that table there that's sitting in the middle of in between the rows. That in itself is a trip hazard. If someone trips on that chair, you might think, oh, we're indemnified of the damages. It's that member's fault. Well, actually, it's not necessarily the thing. And this is something you'll see in like restaurants, regardless of whether that person is intoxicated or not. If you saw someone put out a chair out in a random space, and you have identified as one of the event organizers that it's a trip hazard and someone gets injured, usually typically the case, they'll just they'll say, oh, that's fine, we'll move away from that, or it doesn't matter. But if someone, it doesn't stop someone from suing somebody else or suing the organization, or basically seeking litigation. But it could depend, it could be anyone, could just think about that. And if they do end up seeking litigation for injury, maybe because the injury was extensive or something like that, they can absolutely do that. And so this is where the idea of negligence law takes place. Just because it's not you, it's not you that did the moving of the chair, because it's your event, and because as event organizers, you do have this duty to have a look around and make sure that everything is okay. Might not, it's hard to predict, but it's also hard to manage. But it's stuff that you have to look out for because it could be on you. Um, Depending on how it goes and what the legalities are or something. For the most part, thankfully, it never happens. But if it does, this is something that you look out for. It's ideally risk management is looking out for things that you don't think will happen, because if it does happen, it's quite severe. It's quite, yeah, it just takes a lot of your time and a lot of that causes a lot of damage. Um, And of course, when it comes to something that you have to look out for as well, is not only people, when it comes to clubs ticking boxes, they're only following some of the rules. When you're doing your RA at the end, just because you put your initials there doesn't mean you're done, you're good. Um, you also have to follow everything in there, not just ignore your essential stuff. So, like for example, if you're gonna plan a morning walk trip or a bushwalking trip or something like that, just because you send out a packing list on an email and then expect them to rock up and then that's it, that's not the case. A waiver form and a packing list does not immediately tick all the boxes in terms of you meeting your obligations to make sure that the event is safe. If, for example, you don't conduct a gear check, you know, for whatever reason, that does not mean you've done your duty of care, that you've ticked all the boxes, and that you allow, because you're basically allowing a participant to engage in an activity despite the situation where they're actually not, it's not safe for them to participate, and a potential to breach your duty of care. And I say this, I had my own experience with this too. So this was about a decade ago. I was on a field trip for a geology class, and basically I was kind of like very much an indoor person, quite introverted and all that. I did follow through with the gear list, but I was not quite, um, I guess not as aware as I am now, with the requirements. And so I rocked up to a field trip in Crocs. Kind of stupid that I rock up in Crocs, but that's how it was. And at that time, risk management and there wasn't any form that I had to fill out apart from like an attendance sheet. And like we're supposed to be responsible for our own medication, our own medical stuff. There wasn't a medical disclosure that I had to fill in at that time, and this was with uh, a tertiary organization. So I rocked up in Crocs, but they allowed me to go, and they didn't say anything about it. And I ended up getting on an accident when we went on a swamp, like a marshland. I sank halfway through a mangrove, and nobody really cared. Like the unit coordinators, that sort of thing, they just thought that I was being stupid. But it took one random student who had all the right gear to just haul me out of there, but no one else helped. But it's one of those things where nowadays that stuff wouldn't fly. If something happened to me that's worse, they will say, oh well, it's that guy's fault, but it's actually not the case. And yeah, something you have to think about now. There's a lot of things that were were fine then, or like something negligible then, but it's not something that you look out for now, because yeah, a lot of things could have gotten worse if that were the case. So just making sure that you do what you need to do before you start the event, especially if you're doing something that would involve a certain level of risk. When it comes to waivers, so this is waivers for something like highly risky trips, or for I guess events where you're gonna have to bring children in, or yeah, something that has a certain level of risk where you need to have a waiver signed. Now, a waiver is not a one and done document where it's like if something happens, you could present to court and say, "Oh, you're done. Like they've signed it, so they were informed that there was a risk, so I'm gonna acquit you of like any wrongdoing." That's not the case. A waiver of liability is just one of the steps required to show that you've informed someone that there was a risk involved, but it's by no means a document that's like the ultimate document where you're no longer liable for anything. It's just an informed consent, but it does not alter your responsibilities whatsoever. It's an extra step, so to speak. So just keep that in mind. If you ever have to ask someone to sign a waiver of liability as a club executive, make sure you're aware of your liabilities, but ensure that you inform the attendee that they have to sign this, if they had to sign this, but also know that it's only a risk, like informing someone that they have a risk, that there's a risk involved with this activity, but by no means you're, as an executive, that you are no longer, or that your club is no longer yeah that your club is indemnified of the damages. Medical disclosures. again, for things where attendees are not in control of their own food or catering, or if you're doing something a little bit riskier, not necessarily, you don't have to fill in medical disclosures for, you know, meetings or workshops or something for indoors. This is more for like, you know, you're going on a day trip outdoors or something like that. It's another layer, like a waiver of liability. It's another layer of risk management and collective responsibility for everyone in the group, not just for the person who has medical issues. Because if you're doing food sharing, for example, um, yes, it's in the onus of that person to inform you that they have a medical, um, like dietary requirements or something like that, but also informing them as well that they need to ensure that they have all the medication they're required. And as club leaders, that you are aware of who and what issues that person might be, um, might be dealing with, like what medical or dietary things that they need to be aware of. But yeah, again, simply relying on, again, a signed version of this medical disclosure or a signed version of an RA, as sole legal documents isn't your one and done protection. They're just, again, like a waiver and a duty of care stuff. They're just a due layer of diligence to support an argument if it ever gets to something very legal. So, now for planning and running your events, again, paperwork, as we've gone through, it's to do with your, how do you run it from start to finish? So this is the flow chart that we use, and you can find this on our website too, under community events and resources info library. On our website, this is how you run it, an event from start to finish, but ensuring that you have a lead time. So if you're gonna run something really, ideally we want you to submit 10 business days before your event. So 10 business days meaning Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. We don't work the weekends. So if you have something urgent to get approval for, ideally please do plan ahead, and ideally at least 10 business days ahead, because it does, especially during the beginning of semesters for the first 4 weeks, or at least, for semester one, even more so in February, where we get into the high gear, the very peak period for planning. So we do send out a reminder email to your club's email to make sure that you provide us as much time as possible about your event. And again, we'll also assess your application based on the level of information that you tell us. So if you exclude any information whatsoever, we might not account for that in your current approved RA. And if you do something that's not written in your RA, then your RA is void and you'll be liable for that risk. So just make sure that when you fill out your application, you tell us as much as information as possible to make sure that you're assessed correctly. And if you have to make any changes to your RA, you just got your risk assessment, just have to let us know and we can inform it. You don't need to submit a separate risk assessment to change to change the information entirely. You just let us know. And of course, please ensure to consider what kind of risk hazards that you have and put your initials in there too to manage and I guess inform us which person will manage this risk or if it has to be everyone else. And yeah, because uh, we have peak periods. Make sure that you submit it early. We also have a flow chart, like an events planning flow chart for food and beverages as well, apart from this one. Um, so you can see here, we submit 10 business days prior, and then you look out where are you running your event, whether it's on campus or off campus or in a community space. With the community space, this is slightly changing a bit because their team is restructuring, so it will now be under student events, which has only recently changed. But for the most part, a lot of the events, if say for example you're running things at the studio theater, that's now under venue hire office. If you type venue hire office UTAS, they'll pop up. The only thing that the student events right now are managing is the Hobart Apartments Student Hub, the one at in Elizabeth Street. So you email student events. If you do email community.experience, it will automatically change to student events. But it's only for that venue. Everything else is on the venue hire. And you can find the links to here through campus services or venue hire that will lead you into that. The same team that works at campus services is like the venue hire people are the same team that works at the campus services space, so you'll be communicating with the same people. And once you've submitted, once you've had that, you know what event you want to run, and you know when you want to run it. Then you complete your event application. We approve it along with the risk assessments, and then you have to create your event on QPay on Rubrik. And create an event. So that's like selling your tickets there. Even if it's for free, just create it. You have to make sure that you capture information like what the student ID is, and contact information and domestic or those sorts of things, the basic email and stuff like that. Once you've done that, then you can proceed with the event planning, food and beverage equipment, which just differentiates between what requirements you have if you're going to have food at your events or what whether you have alcohol. So in here, this is what the risk assessments look like. I know it's quite extensive, but with so we're currently working on as I mentioned in previous meetings, but also our council meetings. We're in the process of switching away from Rubrik, from QPay, and we're integrating it into our website. So a new CRM in our own website, which will shorten the entire process of application. So we're combining everything into one rather than you having to go to Rubrik and then completing a separate Word document form. But in the interim, at least for this semester, we're doing all of these things. And this is what an event application looks like, which you might have already seen. But if not, well, this is what it looks like. So you don't complete, when it comes to the RA, this is the first page. Don't write anything on the red table, the red colored table. That's only for office use. Only fill out the bottom bit, so the blue bit, where it tells you about your event name. Pretty straightforward how you would fill out a form. So like what your event is, what your society is. Are you planning to co-host an event with another group? So that if you're running, for example, a session with an external, like you're inviting them over to run an event, like a networking event, for example, then you write the name of the organization here. Ideally, you also write the name of the person from the external organization co-hosting your event in the event organizers list. So you gotta make sure identify, so that way we know which is which. So their contact details as well and what their position is. Event staff committee, please make sure to put in how many of you are gonna organize the event. A lot of people forget to put this in and instead they just chuck them in the participant numbers. But we need to know how many people are gonna be managing your event. And then also participant numbers. You can put that separately outside of the number of, like you don't have to include the number of organizers into the total participant numbers, although it'll be helpful too, so we count them separately. So that we could tell, like, for example, if you're running alcohol events, we could then add that in and say, okay, well, do you need security or not, based on the number of people you'll have, or whether you have enough crowd controllers for the number of people that you have, even if it's for a dry event, but it may or may not involve children, like something like that. You'll include that information in, whether it's on campus and whether it's a repeating event, like a reoccurring event. If you have events that are reoccurring, like let's say you'll have multiple networking events throughout the year, but they're all going to be the same, feel free to submit it as a blanket risk assessment. And the way you apply for a blanket risk assessment just means you tick these two boxes right here on the right-hand side and state how many days per week you're going to run this event and which dates or which days. If you haven't already locked in the specific dates for your event, just say like, oh, we'll run this every Tuesday every week for semester one. So if you say only semester one, then there are 13 weeks in semester one, so we'll multiply it by, and if it's one day a week, then it's 13 events. If it's 2 events, then we multiply it by 2, and so that's 26, and you get approval for that. And all you have to do then separately is to book the spaces with campus services or venue hire office, depending on like if you've already locked in your dates. There's also this at the bottom, again, food, fairly straightforward, and alcohol. You can't bring your own alcohol like BYO alcohol at events. This is a university policy, quite strict on this, so no BYO at your events on campus. If you're doing something like it's on a case by case basis, like off campus, but you need to make sure that you are compliant with the specific council laws, like in terms of like drinking at specific areas, whether you need to have permits or something like that too. With children, we do have a form for this in terms of like searching for parental permission, attendance forms, waiver of liabilities. Please remember that TUSA does not have insurance for under 16s. So our insurance only covers 16 and above. So just please make sure to be mindful of that if you're going to have children at your events or families coming in with children on campus, and also have working with vulnerable people cards as well. The way working with vulnerable people cards work is they're different from a police check. So the working with vulnerable people registration is an ongoing assessment of a person's eligibility to work with vulnerable people. And it checks their criminal history, discriminatory police information, whereas a police check is only a snapshot of a point in time, and it only lists the current offenses from when that snapshot was taken, or from when that request was taken. But a WWVP is basically something that we can verify online and check for ongoing stuff. So that way, you know whether a person be safe or not to attend on campus or for your events. Again, already explained this about blanket risk assessments. So you just make sure that you apply for it if you have something ongoing. It lessens the paperwork for you, but also makes it quick so you don't have to wait for us to continue to approve something if you've got something very similar happening. Now for your paperwork, this is basically the URL to get through to that. So if you're on your rubric and you logged in, just click the forms at the top right, click that, and then the venue hire form and the risk assessment form is all in this page. If you can't see it, just click the view all on the right-hand tab there, and then you could see all the different forms that you can complete to make sure that that you can locate that stuff. You could use our TUSA venue hire form for a number of reasons, like for a number of things, including using it for outdoor events on campus, if you have alcohol events on campus, or if you want to hire a TUSA managed venue. So, but nowadays I'm seeing a lot of clubs use the UTAS contract for stalls and indoor events on campus. You are absolutely, it's okay to use that one. It's the same type of form, just different formatting. And you're fine to use that if you're already using that as a form to complete your bookings for your room. But this is something that we have for TUSA managed venues. So let's say our ref in Sandy Bay campus, if you want to use that, you have to use our TUSA venue hire form to hire our ref for events. This is the website to use that. So utas.edu.au campus services venue hire. That's how you book venue hire forms, like Stanley Burberry, for example, or the KPMG building. Although that is technically managed by a separate administrator, Sharon from Campus Services from Venue Hire does contact them, so if you can book it directly if you don't have the direct contact for any of those administrators. I'd probably see the same for, say, the forest building, for example, in the future when that opens, how that you could book that space too. But yeah, it's increasingly being managed by the venue hire office people. So you can go into this URL and book the spaces that you need to book the spaces on campus through this website. You usually need to complete the form, plus you need to do the online induction that's in there as well. So if you click the how to book the form or how to book link, you'll see three things there, sort of instructions and how you do it. And there's the links that are in that space. This is the form and this is what it looks like. So few of you might be already familiar with this form. That's the form that you need to complete. Fill that in, complete the online induction, which is in here, and then send it to venue hire office along with your approved risk assessment. So you can, so the general procedure would be that, let's say you want to run an event on, I don't know, let's say the 21st of August, but you don't know that if that venue is available on the 21st of August. What you can do is you can email venue hire office and ask, hey, by the way, hi Sharon, is this space available at this time at this date? Usually she would reply and say, yes, it's available, but please make sure you go to TUSA to book the space. So when she says, please go to TUSA to book the space, it doesn't mean that we can book it for you. What it actually means is please complete the paperwork. And then we approve that on your end. So on Rubrik, we approve the application. You'll receive the notification to state, congratulations, your event application has been approved. And there's an attachment at the bottom there with a URL where you can download the risk assessment. Download the risk assessment, complete this form, and then send it to the venue hire or whoever your administrator is for that building. That's what they mean. So if you're doing an event, if you're booking an indoor venue, the onus would be on you to complete the form and complete this form plus send the approved risk assessment to venue hire. So whenever Sharon comes back to you and say, please go to TUSA to book the room, it means submit the approved risk assessment plus submit this to Sharon to venue hire, and then she'll book the space for you, because we're only approving it from a club's perspective or from a club's administrative point of view. We're just approving the event, but we don't have control over the space. And so now this is the what I mentioned about the food, beverage, and equipment. You can find the form under here, so you just submit the form there for if you're gonna have food or alcohol. So the steps there is basically what you need to think about or incorporate if you're gonna have food or alcohol. So for food, if you're gonna have food at your events and it's stuff where you need to cook or manage fresh food, then you need to have a food handling certificate. So you need to complete the food handling certificate and submit the certificates to us. There's a link there in the risk assessment where you can submit the qualification submissions form, or you can email it to us, and we will incorporate that into your RA. We can't approve a risk assessment until we've received all of your certificates that are required. So if you're not sure whether you've submitted something already, just ask us, just email us, and we can check. Otherwise, we'll have to ask you for that. But basically, where you need a food handling certificate would be for anything that's not pre-packed fresh food. So when we say pre-packed non-fresh food, it's like things like lollies or chips, like like the ones from Woolies sort of thing. If they're the only ones that you are serving at your event, like chips and lollies, that's fine. You don't need a food handling certificate for that. But if it's things like cakes or like muffins that you bought from Woolies, then that's stuff that you need, because even though they're pre-packed, they technically expired. They're not pantry. If they're pantry items, you don't need to have food handling certificates for those generally. But for ones that are pretty fresh, then yeah, you'll need food handling certificates for those. Alcohol on campus. If you're ever going to think about running alcohol at your events, the link is in here. This is directly from the Taz Liquor and Gaming. You only need to go onto this point if you are selling alcohol on campus. If you're only providing it for free, you're not charging entry tickets, then you need to go onto this link here, the University Liquor Permit application. You need to complete that for the you need to complete that for things on campus. So again, only go into the if you're providing it for free, like you're not charging for entry or you're not taking donations, gold coin, or fundraising with alcohol. If it's none of those, then only fill out the university liquor permit application, which is on this flow chart right here. But the moment that you're incorporating anything that has monetary transaction on it, like donations or way of entry charging or gold coin fundraising, stuff like that, then you need to consider this one. So you need to apply for a special Taz Liquor and Gaming special permit for less than 4 days. This is what the link looks like when you click it. It's basically a liquor permit form that you then need to complete, and then send us the successful application once you receive it after your event. Um, in order to complete this, you needed to have the risk assessment approved, plus the venue hire or stall application approved. Um, both signatures are like the clubs and societies officer, whoever assesses the application. That we need to have it approved. Plus, also Sharon from Campus Services needs to have signed off on the liquor permit, and that's what you will need to present when you complete this document, or complete this form to state that your application, you are allowed to have an alcohol event at that venue and you're allowed to sell alcohol at that venue. That's your approval. Usually with them, they tend to approve things quite late. So let's say, even if you send the application in 2 weeks ahead, sometimes they might approve it the day before or on the day itself. Really, what you just need to keep in mind is to make sure that you send us the approval form. Plus, also on that application, they'll send you a site map. You need to display that at your event along with your fine time and wait on signage, like RSA signage. You need to have that displayed on the site, including the whatever they send you on this one. If you need those signages, just ask us. We do have a copy, but you need to return them as well. Alcohol at events. So again, we're just running out for time, so just gonna get these through quickly. These are the rules in terms of like if you're gonna have alcohol at your events, what you have to look out for. You are limited to 3.5 hours of alcohol service on campus, and you need to call last drinks 30 minutes prior to the end of your alcohol session. You can submit your qualification submissions on this it's on the risk assessment. That's where you upload your RSAs or your food handling certificates as well, or any other certificates required. Glasses are not allowed on campus, so you need to serve everything on cans or plastic cups, and you must crack the can before you serve it. You can't just hand it over to someone uncracked. And these are basically around the RSA service rules without having to have but you need to have your RSA, but these are specific on campus rules as well, and club rules. And again, I've mentioned this already, signages and certificates, you need to have that. Please make sure not to have any drinking games or anything that would encourage someone to consume alcohol at a rapid rate. It's strictly prohibited. BYO, again, mentioned this already. You're not allowed to have BYO on campus, and we're not going to authorize any functions with BYO on alcohol as well. Event agreement, if you're running everything, if you're going to run something off campus like a pub, you need to complete this event agreement letter, and under the CNS resource and info library. This just makes sure that the pubs themselves are aware of what their responsibilities are, especially if you're having a private booking with them, because they tend to be venues where they don't necessarily follow, their liquor licensing um, terms and conditions. Like for example, they're serving someone who's intoxicated. It's happened at one of the events where they're over serving someone and the club executive had to call them out and say, you can't serve this person because they're clearly intoxicated. But it's making sure that you're doing what you can and you're taking the steps required to make sure that the event is safe. And you need to make sure that you have enough crowd controllers, which it's in this document as well that you sign between you as the club and the pub or the licensed venue. So to make sure that they're providing sufficient crowd controllers and um, you're gonna have sufficient sober representatives as well that you're gonna be bringing on campus onto that event. If you need to hire any equipment from us, there's Bookable. You can find it under our CNS Resource Info library. There's a manual under event on how you can access that. Otherwise, you can ask your executive members as well on how you can access this. There's a bunch of here that you can hire. You can look out what categories you can hire from and hire it from there. Or email us, we can send you a link. But these are all free as a club, a TUSA affiliated club. You can hire these for free. You can look at what offerings we have. If you have a grant, if you've already attended my my grant application session from last week, you'll be fine. But basically, this is just if you're gonna run an event, consider applying for a grant. But we can only approve it based on if you've had an event application or risk assessment approved. So these are the conditions in which you are able to access the ability to apply for a grant. So you need to be reaffiliated for that year. You can usually tell if you are by going to Rubrik and seeing your status on the TUSA if you're affiliated. You need to have 10 current UTAS student members, and you need to have 51% UTAS student membership overall. Overall in your entire club, if you look at your membership list on Rubrik or if you have a separate spreadsheet, you just need to make sure that from your reaffiliation year at that time, you need to have at least 51% student members. And your executive has to be at least 50% students. You can have, even if you've already graduated, you can still be a member of that club and you can still be an executive member of that club. So if you're no longer a student, you can still be an executive, but you just need to make sure that the percentage of student executives and overall student members is at least 51%. So let's say if you have 3 executives in the committee or three members in the executive, like president, treasurer, secretary, one of them could be non-student, but the other 2 have to be student. So you just have to have the ratio looked out for in order to meet your eligibility requirements for not only for grant claims, but to be affiliated in general. And you can find a list of the 11 requirements to be affiliated or maintain your affiliation with us in our handbook, because we do audit your membership list throughout the year. But yeah, also make sure if it's for an event that you need to have the event application received and approved by us before you submit your grant application. But we have our deadlines in there too, which we presented in our previous session, but you can also find it in our website. Last but not least, you can find our information about planning and running your events in our handbook on page 59. You can access this on the CNS Resource and Info Library under event in our website, tusa.org.au, under community and then CNS Resource and Info Library. Go to our handbook, or you can search in our search bar, TUSA CNS Handbook, and you'll find this huge PDF, which shows you all the information you need to read through. And that's it for that. Our next sessions will be next month on the 11th of September for affiliations and reaffiliations, and 25th of September in how to run a proper meeting. You can scan our QR code there and it takes you to our website. And you can pre-book those events so you can attend. That's it. I'll stop the recording now.